Former Brown student identified a suspect in deadly campus shooting and MIT professor killing, authorities say. A multi-state investigation ends with discovery of suspect's body in New Hampshire. The man authorities believe carried out one of the deadliest acts of violence in Brown University's modern history and later killed a prominent Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor has been publicly identified as Claudio Manuel Neves-Valente, a former student who briefly studied physics at Brown more than 2 decades ago. Officials confirmed Thursday evening that Neves-Valente, 48, was found dead inside a storage unit in Salem, New Hampshire, following a multi-agency operation involving federal, state, and local law enforcement. Investigators say preliminary evidence indicates the suspect died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, bringing an end to a case that had placed 2 elite academic institutions under intense scrutiny and left multiple communities shaken. Authorities emphasize that while the discovery closes the immediate manhunt, many questions surrounding motive, planning, and warning signs remain unresolved. A week that shattered campus normalcy. The violence began on a quiet Saturday afternoon during Brown University's final exam period, a time normally marked by review sessions, late-night studying, and students preparing to leave campus for winter break. Shortly after 4 p.m., a masked gunman entered a classroom inside Barus and Holley Hall, a long-standing academic building on the eastern edge of Brown's campus. Inside the room, students were gathered for a scheduled review session for an undergraduate economics course. Without warning, the intruder shouted something witnesses could not clearly hear and opened fire. When the shooting stopped, 2 students lay dead. 9 others had been struck by gunfire. The classroom, moments earlier filled with notebooks, laptops, and exam questions, became the scene of chaos, trauma, and loss. The 2 students killed were later identified as Ella Cook, a student from Alabama, and Muhammad Aziz Umarzokov, a student from Virginia. Both were described by peers as hardworking, kind, and deeply committed to their studies. Several of the injured were rushed to nearby hospitals, some in critical condition. As of Thursday afternoon, 6 victims remained hospitalized but were reported to be in stable condition. Immediate lockdown and a campus on edge. Within minutes of the first emergency calls, Brown University initiated an emergency lockdown. Students were ordered to shelter in place. Law enforcement vehicles flooded the area and helicopters circled overhead. Parents across the country watched anxiously as alerts lit up phones. Social media filled with fragmented reports, photos of police activity, and desperate messages from students trying to confirm the safety of friends. The university canceled classes, suspended events, and eventually encouraged students to leave campus early once authorities determined there was no ongoing active threat. For many, the sudden departure meant leaving behind unanswered questions and the lingering fear that the person responsible had not yet been found. Providence Mayor Brett Smiley later described the days following the shooting as deeply unsettling, noting that the community was desperate for clarity. Early investigation and the search for a suspect. Providence Police, assisted by the FBI and Rhode Island State Police, launched an expansive investigation almost immediately. Detectives canvassed nearby neighborhoods, businesses, and residential buildings, seeking any surveillance footage that might capture the suspect's movements before or after the attack. Footage eventually surfaced showing a masked individual near the campus around the time of the shooting. Investigators released still images to the public, describing the person of interest as stocky, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, and walking with a distinctive gait. Experts analyzing the footage pointed out a noticeable irregularity in how the individual's right leg moved, a detail investigators hoped could help generate tips. At one point, authorities questioned an individual at a hotel outside Providence, but later ruled that person out as a suspect. Another individual was briefly sought for information, though police clarified they were not believed to be responsible for the shooting. Despite these developments, the suspect remained unidentified for several days, a fact that heightened anxiety as the campus emptied and potential witnesses dispersed for winter break. As investigators continued working a Brown University case, a separate and deeply troubling crime occurred roughly 50 miles away. On Monday, a respected MIT nuclear physicist, Nuno Loureiro, was found dead at his home in Brooklyn, Massachusetts. Authorities determined he had suffered fatal gunshot wounds. While officials initially released few details, the killing quickly drew attention due to the victim's stature in the scientific community. Loureiro was widely regarded for his work in plasma physics and nuclear research, and had long-standing ties to international academic institutions. As evidence emerged, investigators began examining potential links between the Brown shooting and the MIT professor's death. By Thursday, federal prosecutors confirmed what many feared. Authorities believed the same individual was responsible for both crimes. Identification of the suspect. At a Thursday evening press briefing in Providence, police formally identified the suspect as Claudio Manuel Neves-Valente. According to officials, Neves-Valente was a Portuguese national who enrolled at Brown University in the fall of 2000 as a physics student.
He attended classes through the spring of 2001 before taking a leave of absence. University records indicate he ultimately withdrew in 2003. Brown President Christina Paxson emphasized that Neves-Valente had no current connection to the university and had not been affiliated with campus life for more than 20 years. She also noted that Barus and Holley Hall, the site of the shooting, houses many physics and engineering classrooms, making it likely a familiar space to him during his brief academic tenure. Past academic and employment history. Investigators also uncovered records indicating that a man with the same name had been employed in a monitoring role at Instituto Superior Técnico in Portugal around the year 2000. That employment ended the same year. Authorities believe the former employee and the Brown student are the same individual. The connection drew further attention because MIT professor Nuno Loureiro was also an alumnus of Instituto Superior Técnico. Officials have not stated whether this shared academic link played a role in the violence, cautioning that any conclusions about motive would be premature. At this stage, investigators say no manifesto or clear explanation for the attacks has been identified. The New Hampshire discovery. As law enforcement continued piecing together Neves-Valente's movements, evidence led them north to New Hampshire. On Thursday evening, federal agents, working with local authorities, surrounded a storage facility in Salem. Tactical units remained on site for several hours as they prepared to enter a unit believed to be linked to the suspect. At approximately 9 p.m., agents breached the storage locker. Inside, they found Neves-Valente deceased. Leah B. Foley, U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts, later confirmed that investigators believe he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. No officers were injured during the operation. Officials did not disclose what items, if any, were recovered from the unit, stating that forensic analysis was ongoing. Jurisdictional cooperation and federal involvement.
Authorities stressed that the investigation required unprecedented coordination across multiple jurisdictions. The Brown University shooting fell under the authority of Providence Police and Rhode Island prosecutors, while the MIT professor's killing was handled by Massachusetts law enforcement with federal oversight. The FBI played a central role in evidence collection, behavioral analysis, and surveillance review. Federal prosecutors later confirmed that Neves-Valente was the primary suspect in both crimes. This was a complex, fast-moving investigation involving multiple states and agencies, officials said. The priority was ensuring public safety. The human toll. While the identification of a suspect brought a measure of clarity, it did little to ease the grief felt by victims' families, classmates, and colleagues. Students described Ella Cook as warm-hearted and driven, someone who supported others even under academic pressure. Friends of Muhammad Aziz Umarzakov spoke of his determination and generosity, recalling his pride in his education and future ambitions. At MIT, colleagues remembered Nuno Loureiro as a dedicated scientist, mentor, and collaborator whose work extended far beyond the classroom. Counseling services were expanded at both universities, and vigils were held to honor the victims. Unanswered questions. Despite the end of the manhunt, significant questions remain. What motivated the attacks? Why were these specific locations and individuals targeted? Were there warning signs missed years earlier? Did the suspect act entirely alone? Investigators have said they are continuing to review digital evidence, travel records, and forensic data in hopes of constructing a clearer timeline. Officials caution that some questions may never be fully answered. Community reflection and moving forward. In the days following the shooting, Brown University officials faced difficult decisions, balancing safety with the emotional well-being of students preparing to leave campus. Providence residents, meanwhile, grappled with the reality that such violence could strike in a familiar academic setting. "This has changed our community," Mayor Smiley said, "but we will continue to support one another and honor the lives lost." Conclusion. The identification of Claudio Manuel Neves-Valente as the suspect in both the Brown University mass shooting and the killing of an MIT professor marks the end of an intense, painful chapter, but not the end of its impact. 2 students are gone. A respected scientist is gone. Families, classmates, and colleagues are left with grief that will not fade quickly. As investigations continue and communities begin the long process of healing, officials say the focus must remain on the victims, their lives, their futures, and the legacy they leave behind. 2022. Rest in peace and condolences. We extend our deepest condolences to the families of Ella Cook and Muhammad Aziz Umarzakov, to the loved ones and colleagues of Nuno Loureiro, and to everyone affected by these acts of violence. May the victims be remembered for who they were, not for the tragedy that took them.